Hi, I'm retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast, where you get unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page, where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes NYPD books. They're $10 paperback or $2.99 ebook download, including my latest and greatest, NYPD Presumption and Dysfunction. Today's guest is a retired NYPD auto crime detective turned entrepreneur whose decorative signs and plaques are second to none. I have several of his masterpieces in my home, and I encourage you to check out his website at signandseal.net. Mickey Finn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vic. How are you?
I'm doing great. Mickey, we work together in the auto crime division. Please tell our listeners a little something about yourself.
I'm retired for 10 years now, but started the job in February 94, worked in patrol. After 21 and a half years, I decided to retire, and I started a second hobby, making plaques and signs and just putzing around basically. And then it just evolved into selling pieces and, getting involved with other organizations like Blue Lives Matters. And I help out with honoring the widows and orphans, and I donate a lot of stuff annually to them. And that's currently what I'm doing at the moment, is creating some plaques and pieces, but it also enables me to donate stuff and give back as much as I can also.
And you and I worked together in the auto crime division. I worked in the Bronx office. You worked out in the main office in Queens. We used to refer to it as the mothership, which was located in the Creedmoor Psychiatric Facility. Mickey, looking back all these years later, isn't it fitting that our headquarters was in a loony bin?
Yeah, I mean, trying to explain that to people that weren't there, it's hard to explain to people. It's like, what do you mean your office is in the psychiatric center? I said, well, it's an abandoned psychiatric center, and it's, it's spooky. That building was very spooky at night, especially. I mean, I know one lieutenant that was afraid to go out to his car because he used to park a little bit out of the way, and the raccoons would chase him to his car, and he was petrified of these raccoons. And, at night you could be driving out of that. You know how it is. It's kind of a maze to get in there. If you don't know how to get there and no one showed you, you might not find it. So when you're driving out of the complex at night, I've seen naked people run past me in front of my car. Where I just shook my head and said, no, I didn't see that. And I just went home. Or, I've seen people running with a hospital gown on, with their ass hanging out, and two orderlies chased them down the street. I've come across that. Oh, lie. And you just can't make this up. So yeah, it was nutty, but it was, it was okay. We kind of listen, it was close to home. It was easy to get to. The building itself was terrible. The electricity was always going in and out. I used to find paw prints on my desk from animals. Like if I had paperwork and files, for example, on my desk, I'd find paw prints on my desk the next morning because someone left the window open or they didn't empty the garbage or some shit like that. But, yeah, it was crazy place to work. Literally.
Well, from the outside, when you look at it, it looked like a Soviet era military installation. It was concrete block, and it was a 3-level building. And I think it was one floor was warrants, another floor was narcotics. Auto crime had the 3rd floor, and you had to access it. You had to walk up a steel staircase. And in the wintertime, that thing would freeze. I don't know how half the police department didn't get 3/4 slipping on ice and breaking their ass going up there.
Yeah.
And like you said, you walked in and it was like a railroad apartment that just went on forever down a corridor, and off each team had its own little office. But you're right, at night, doing calls for service, and I'll get into that later, it was like something out of The Shining, and it was spooky. You're in there sometimes all alone or, with your partner, and it's like, it's dark and the power's going in and out and the wind is howling. It was like, you were in Czechoslovakia somewhere. Like, where the hell did they send me?
True. Yeah. Yeah. The conditions were rough. The heat sucked. The air conditioning sucked.
Always cold.
You had to always wearing a jacket, sitting at your desk typing, literally cold. Maybe a little space heater if you were lucky, but you're taking a chance because you might blow out the electrical system, which had this very old type fuses that were the old screw-in ones. Nobody could find them, first of all, and nobody wanted to touch them. But, looking back, it was interesting. It was nice. But when we finally moved to the new building in College Point in 2009, it was like moving into the Ritz-Carlton, modular desks, brand new lockers, bathroom with showers, and there was doors on the bathroom. There was seats on the toilet. Like, wow, we're living in luxury over here.
All right, before we get rolling with the auto crime stories, and we're gonna have more than a few, why did you want to become a member of the New York City Police Department?
Well, to be totally honest, I did not. I didn't want anything to do with it. I had said, nope. Now my father was a career guy. He was on New York City, Nassau County, and Suffolk County. He did
Oh, wow.
30 plus years altogether, but he started in New York City in 1955 and retired, I think, in 1986 out of Suffolk County, Eastern Long Island. And at the time, he took a pay cut to go to Nassau, and then he took another pay cut to come to Suffolk. Back then, they weren't making nearly what they're doing now. Those large contracts didn't come until late '80s, early '90s. So, I mean, living the life as a cop's son, growing up, and him working midnights, 4 to 12 day tours. You're walking on eggshells most of your young adult life. You can't make noise. You can't have friends over. You can't practice your guitar. You can't, you know, all these little things you can't do because you wake your father up. You're gonna pay for that one way or another. Anyway, so I didn't listen, and I went my own route early on. I was going into the aviation mechanical, P mechanics for aviation after school. I did some college, but nothing was taken off because the airline industry was tanking. Pan Am, TWA was going out of business. And I kind of just took the city test as a goof with a friend just to take it, just to say, hey, let's see how I score, let's see what happens. And I never planned on staying there. I figured on coming out to the islands, but I wound up staying. So I'm glad I did in a lot of ways. And I had opportunities to leave when I first got to Autocrime. When I first got on, I wound up in the 103 in South Jamaica, which was kind of an eye-opening experience for a young kid from Long Island. But I was older. I was a 28-year-old rookie, and a lot of the younger kids were, 21, 20, I think. But I'm glad I waited till I was older because I don't think I would have made good choices.
Well, the 103 is a busy precinct. What was that like for you coming from Long Island and now you're kind of thrown into the mix?
Well, it was a learning experience. At this point, it's 1994, early 94, I think. And a lot of history there with Eddie Byrne, 2 years prior. And a lot of the guys that worked with him and that worked on that case were still working in that precinct. So I have to say, a lot of the guys were very helpful. They looked after young rookie cops. Detectives would routinely come down to roll call and talk to everyone, say, look out for this guy. Don't go here, go there. Don't go, just giving you a heads up. And they always said, if you have any questions, come upstairs and talk to us. And then, of course, at the time, you had the anti-crime guys, SNU guys, a lot of some plainclothes guys running around that precinct. So they wanted you to routinely see these guys' faces to know who's who when you're out there. And, it was a good thing they did. So learned a lot there. You learned a lot quickly, a baptism by fire, as I always say, and, I kind of chose to go there. Like I had no problem going there. It was close to the train station. You're still from Long Island. It's not too bad. The 105 was nicer, but tougher to get to. But I made a lot of lifelong friends from that precinct that I still stay in touch with. And I have nothing bad to say about that place, except it was a tough neighborhood to work, especially being on, a foot post for probably 2.5 years. I think that was the time frame back then. You'd walk for 2.5, 3 years until a sector opened up. And my first foot post, I never forget, it was on Guy Brewer Boulevard from 107th Avenue to 110th Avenue, which is basically the 40 projects. It was an eye opener, especially on a 4 to 12 when you had a split post and you had a sergeant that said you cannot walk with the adjoining post. He wanted you on one side of the street. And then an old timer would come by and say, hey, no, you don't split up. I don't care what that sergeant says. You guys walk together in this neighborhood. So, you learn your battles and what to deal with. And you learn how to get off foot posts. You learn there's a derelict car somewhere, or there's something that needs to be vouched, or you want to get back in the precinct with a collar. You can get off the street 3-4 hours and not freeze your ass off for 8 hours. So you learn how to skin the cat, as they say. I mean, it was a short 5 years I was there, but in that short period of time, I definitely learned a lot, and a lot of different scenarios, a lot of scenes, a lot of shootings, a lot of death, a lot of stabbings, a lot of railroad scenes, people getting hit by trains and whatnot. And, just crazy stuff. I remember my first summer or my second summer there, I didn't have a summer pick because I was a rookie. and I got sent down to the Rockaways for the summer detail, and I was pissed. I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me." So, I'm down there for the summer, and it turns out to be the best thing because it was like an 11 to 7 tour. It was like you had a piece of the weekend. I think it was like a Sunday, Monday, maybe, or Friday, Saturday, I forget, probably Sunday, Monday, and, I was still single at the time, so I was having fun down at the Rockaways. I didn't have to get there too early. You're not getting home too late. You can go out, you can do your thing. And I walked a lot. And I walked that boardwalk all the way from Beach 100th Street, where the 100 Precinct is, I believe, all the way to 116th Street on the boardwalk. And I never looked so good in my life. I was tan, I was skinny, made some friends with the lifeguards. They invite me over for, clam bakes at night and go out. It actually turned out to be a great experience. Again, I chalk it up to experiences. There was a lot of experiences in that job that seem like, makes you who you are, as you keep going. So yeah, that was fun. And then yeah, the 103 was great. There's always bosses that come and go. We had the infamous Charlie Gunther as a CO. I don't know if you ever heard of Charlie Gunther. He, this guy was not well liked within more than just the precinct, other boroughs for that matter. But he didn't let guys leave, this and that, the other thing. That's when the whole urinal targets came out. Came up with the Charlie Gunther urinal targets, and they were citywide. They were all over the nation. Guys were strategically placing them in urinals from New York down to Florida, and wherever they went on vacation, there was a
I
urinal.
saw them.
Anyway, so he tried. Actually, he tried to not get me to go to auto larceny, but somehow, some way, when he went on vacation, I got transferred to auto larceny, and I thought I was going to get taken back. But it was some guys that were brought back from narcotics because of him while they were in training. He's like, "Oh, no, no, I don't want them in narcotics. I need them back here." And, can you imagine being in the middle of training and get sent back to your commands? He was not a happy man, this guy. Was, the littlest thing. Quick story with him. I was Jamaica Avenue. I was a young cop. It was a horrific accident on a crosswalk. Catholic school, female Catholic school, girls, bunch of girls. Got ran over in a crosswalk on Jamaica Avenue, somewhere in 197th Street, I think. And we get to the scene. One girl was still pinned under the car that hit them all. And we're trying to get the car up. We're trying to do this, we do that. It was a chaotic scene. And it must have been about 12 or 13 victims, little girls. Now we're at the hospital. At the time it was Mary Immaculate. It's gone now. And I'm in there writing down, making notifications, making calls, this and that. The CO's driver comes up to me and says, "You're not wearing your hat." He wants to know why. And I looked at him. I said, "Are you freaking kidding me? I'm not wearing my hat. My hat's in the car. I'm inside a building anyway, number one." I said, "I'm not wearing my hat because I'm trying to take care of, this chaos that's going on." And, his true colors really came out. So, that was just one quick story. But yeah, it made a lot of friends. Things were different back then, as you know.
Yeah.
What you could do, what you wanted to do was different. But, they had a lot of foot posts in that precinct, a lot. I think about 30, which I really can't compare it to any other place. I never really worked in any other borough on a foot post, but I don't know if 30 is a lot, but it sounds like a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah. But, yeah, 103 was great, great place. A lot of, they were a tight-knit group, and the camaraderie was great. You get caught up early on, you do the 4 to 4s, you go out after a 4 to 12, and I was got caught up in that. But, you got tight with these guys. A lot of them, like, if you needed help, they were there, and vice versa. If you needed help, it went both ways, you help each other out.
The 103 had a lot of homicides. Did any stand out to you?
Yeah, there was a couple of them. I remember one time there was not really notable as far as famous people, but as far as homicides, yeah, there was a couple. And uh, in the middle of the day, there was a gunfight, and I believe it was, I don't remember, but it was a shooting that where the guy opened fire on him. They were sitting in the RMP, and they returned fire through the windshield, and they killed him. And it was a big guy. Guy was like 6'4", huge, massive guy. And I can remember being at the hospital sitting on the body because it was at Mary Immaculate. I got out of the roll call. I got sent over there. This happened on the day tour. This was the 4 to 12. So that was a memorable one. And horrifying day was when a perp breaks into a car. I don't know if it was a federal agent, possibly a federal agent, still stole a handgun and went on a shooting spree and shot 2 Con Edison workers, kind of famous incident back then, where he paralyzed one of them and he blinded the second one. And so that was during the day tour. We come in for 4 to 12, and I'm walking to my post on Archer Avenue by the railroad station, and they anti-crime, I believe, had the guy cornered along the railroad track on the other side of me. And I heard 1013, and I come flying through the tunnel, which is like Beaver Road, I think. And you come through the tunnel. As soon as I make the turn, now I'm on foot and I'm running. All these guys, they saw fire and there's a shootout going on. So I dive behind one of the cars. I don't let a round go off because at that time, as quick as I got there and got set up, it ended. Purpose
Right.
shot 8 times and lived. And it was so chaotic, but it ended with no one else getting hurt. And I remember later that night, the whole anti-crime team was like, we're going out tonight. They caught him. I'm like, all right. So, we go out, and that was a whole nother experience, with these seasoned guys. But everybody that was on the scene was like, it was kind of weird to explain, but it was almost like a welcoming, like they welcomed you because you were there and you were there to help. And, I might not have fired any rounds, but, you know, they just made you feel like, yeah, you were there, you helped, this and that. And, it felt good. So that was a learning experience. But there were several, incidences that I responded to that were horrific in many ways. I remember a woman that just got out of a psychiatric center and was only home for 2 days, and she had not even a one-year-old child. The child was 11 months old, and she had an older daughter, maybe 5 or 6 years old. So she says to the 5 or 6-year-old, "I want you to go to bodega and pick up some milk and bread." And while the young girl goes to the bodega, the woman cut the throat of the child, 11-month-old, and then cut her own throat, and then proceeded to fall down the stairs and landed against the door that pushed in. So then someone called 911 because the daughter came back from the store and she couldn't get in, and she seen blood coming from under the door. And we got there, and I'm trying to push the door in. Finally, we had to push the door, and she was a large woman. We had to push her in a small vestibule where the stairs started. So you're kind of locked in there. And the child, so we ran up, found the child, which was disturbing by itself. And EMS came, and the child was pronounced, and the mother lived, which, was totally bizarre. And then, and then this little girl was there without a sibling or soon to be mother. So it was crazy. It was chaotic. So, at the time, and then I had to do some paperwork. And it was the first time that somebody asked me to, do a report, help them with the 49, as they used, like an incident report, or whatever it was called. And it was a newer lieutenant there. He's like, "Oh, you help me with this?" I go, "Yeah, I guess." I said, "And I don't do 49s. I'm on patrol. I know nothing
Right,
about it."
supervisors. Yeah, and for those
Yeah,
listening, a 49 is an incident report. A supervisor at an NYPD command will who, what, where, when, why, and then it gets kicked up to the borough and it gets kicked up to one police plaza, so everyone in the police department knows what happened.
yeah, that's
But
correct.
that's usually on the supervisor to write that up.
Yeah, and I totally was not equipped to be doing that type of thing. I had no investigative experience whatsoever. I'm still on patrol,
Right.
still wet behind the ears. But he kind of guided me. I'd feed him the information as he was typing it, and we'd go over it and this and that. So yeah, look, you learn a little bit here and there. But yeah, there was many incidences that homicides, shootings. There was every day was an exciting occurrence. Fortunately, there was some chases. A lot of the guys would get uh, a GLA or a car-related arrest, and they didn't know what they had. So I'd start looking at it, and I'd say, and having some auto experience in my background, I kind of, knew enough to at least look for like an engine number or a derivative of the vehicle identification number, and try to help them out a little bit if the GLA car was available or not. And sometimes they weren't available, or they were off that day, or whatever. So I kind of like helped out with that, and I kind of started learning what I wanted to do. I wanted to gear my learning towards vehicles and heavy equipment and motorcycles, and then of course seeing unknown to me at the time when I seen auto crime come to the precinct with an arrest or in a case, and they had this flatbed. I'm like, "Who are these guys?" They're wearing coveralls and work boots, and they all got beards, and I said to one guy, I go, "Who the hell are these guys?" He's like, "Oh, those are auto crime." You mean to tell me they're cops?" He goes, "Yeah, they're all detectives." I go,
Yeah.
"Get out of here." I didn't believe him. But then I was like so impressed. I'm like, "Oh, this is cool." I said, "They don't have to wear a suit. They don't have to wear a uniform. They can get dirty and have fun doing it." Little did I know how much fun you could be having, but, that those little things stick in your head, you're young, you're impressionable, you really don't know where you're going, and I always tell young kids now that there's so many age divisions within the department. You have to learn to make your own way, and no one's gonna do it for you. If you don't show interest in some part of that job and learn about it and eager to try to get there to make your life better, maybe, you really have to make your own path. So when I kinda knew my path, I kinda just kinda went with it, and it took a while. It took a while because, that was early on. I didn't get to auto crime until 2001, but prior to that, I was an auto larceny for like 3 and a half, 4 years, I think. So, you had to it was a process, and I had to learn early on that there's a process to things, and if you do the process, you learn this, you go here, the stepping stones at the time, that's how you have to do it. It's not instantaneous, like the kids today, everything is instantaneous. They wanna pick a profession, they want it instantaneously. They don't wanna have to work for it and
Takes time.
cultivate it. I think, that's just me personally, but, you learn. I've learned to slow down even well, especially now, I don't think I can get much slower now, but, um you learn to slow down, and even in my adult retired life, when I'm sitting there doing something, instead of like when I was young, you'd grab it and say, "Oh yeah, I'll move this over there. I'll pick this up and clean the garage out." I'll actually sit and think about it for like a half a day or a day and say, "Okay, how am I strategically going to handle this?" Because A, I don't want to hurt myself because I usually do, throw my back
Yeah.
out or something stupid. Or is there an easy way to do this without doing all this extra work? So yeah, you live and learn, always constantly.
So you go to Queens South Auto Larceny, which, you're on patrol, you're in a precinct. Now you go to an auto larceny unit. I'm guessing it was plain clothes. You got an unmarked car, and basically you're in that borough hunting stolen cars and
Correct.
trying to put a dent on it. And I always call auto larceny units like the AAA affiliate of the auto crime division. That's where you're groomed to go to auto crime. Did Queens South I'm not a Queens guy, so did Queens South cover Willets Point?
No, not when I got there. So at one point, before the borough of Queens split north and south, when it was all Queens, obviously, yes. But sometime, I think shortly before I got there, it split to north and south. So there was a Queens North Auto Larceny and a Queens South, two separate entities. Never even worked with the North guys. So I was in the South, and it was fun. Again, a learning experience. I'm working 9:30 night to 6 in the morning, which I guess I got used to it. Kinda worked out for the family life, this, that, but, worked with some interesting people, um, it's like just a little bit of a history of auto larceny guys going to auto crime. You had guys like, long list, Mike Simeone, Chris Hess, Jimmy
Yeah.
Haley, Steve Bermudez, all a lot of these guys came from, auto larceny and, all great guys. So when I got there, partnered up with, Dave Moore was there.
Oh, yeah.
My partner in auto larceny was, Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson eventually got to auto crime as a sergeant, but when he was a cop, we worked together for a while because we had some, he lived out this way, and he used to frequent my uncle's, deli, where they used to have candy in a box with no wrappers, and it was an old school superette. And it had a little deli counter, candy counter. Anyway, as a kid, Joe used to go in there with his friends and steal candy from my uncle. And the first night we worked together, he divulged this to me. He's like, I said, "Oh, where'd you grow up in Ronkonkoma?" He says, "Oh, over here." And we used to go. I said, "You ever go to Mickey's Deli?" Now, Mickey's Deli, I'm named after my uncle, Mickey. Joe lived there, and they were at that deli almost every day. And he used to tell me how much candy they used to glom from, the poor bastard. So we hit it off, needless to say, and we worked together for, a couple of years until Joe made sergeant and went on to, I believe, the 7-3. And then we kind of lost touch for a few years. And then I went to autocrime, but, and then we reunited in autocrime. Yeah, auto lossing was fun. You learned a lot. There's a whole thing about the learning to decipher that infamous VIN number, the vehicle identification number. This is where you really honed in on your skills, using the mobile digital lottery, I used to call it, the mobile digital lottery machine. and you'd run
Yeah.
a plate number, and then the VIN would pop up, and then,
You got to read it.
actually, Dave Moore was influential on and forcing that on us, like saying, "Oh, you gotta learn how to decipher this VIN number." If the car's a GLE and the VIN number says this, it's not accurate, it's tagged, just like years ago with the old Brahms, the old Caprices.
Chevys.
Um, and I used to remember all these numbers by heart. I can't remember half of them by now. But, it's a constant thing you gotta stay up on, you gotta stay up on these things, and you see a VIN number and you're looking at the trunk of the car, and you're looking at the VIN number and something's off, for us car guys, we see it. Guys that aren't into that, they need to see something that says stolen vehicle or just based off the plate that they weren't into these tag jobs. But that was interesting to learn and to, get into some serious cases on the overnight, which seemed to be more so allowed than during the day. But at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, there was not too many people on the road. So if we're patrolling, you know, the Cross Islands or the Conduit or you name it, there's a lot less people on the road, so a lot less room for error or to hurt anybody. But yeah, we had some doozies, man, that were pretty scary. Um, you know, pursuits, guys with guns, stolen cars, just chases that went on for from one borough to another. I've chased people from Brooklyn into Queens and vice versa. I've chased people from. We used to hang out at the border of Nassau County and Queens on 115th Avenue because there's an underpass that goes under the Cross Island. So a lot of these car thieves would come take 115th Avenue. You could take basically all the way through Queens into Brooklyn. So they would come all the way into Nassau County, just over the border, and get into some of these high-end neighborhoods. Steal a car and then work their way back to Brooklyn. And we just sit at the border and then just
Pick 'em off.
and just feel them out. If you get behind them before you light them up, they get a little hanky. You light them up, then the chase is on. If they pull over, maybe not, it all depends. You know how it is. But, I definitely learned a lot with that, especially being on the late tours. It's very dangerous, looking back at some of the stuff and the car stops we did,
Oh
they
yeah.
say the number one dangerous thing to do on that job is doing a car stop. And, I agree with that. I mean, some of the stuff we did, I mean, we were cautious, but, then again, anything could have went on at any given time. I remember doing a car stop in the middle of the night, pulling the guy out of the car, and I felt a gun on his waistband, and it turned out to be like a 40 or 45 caliber, and he was fully loaded with hollow points. And a partner at the time, I believe was Joe Jackson. So we had this thing where I would call him out I call him Bob. I'm like, "Hey, Bob, do me a favor, come over here for a second." He come around from the passenger side. There was only one occupant in the vehicle. So by me calling him Bob, he knew who this guy was carrying. And he went high, I went low. We had this guy tied up in seconds, and I pulled this gun out. I'm like, it was giant. It was a big ass freaking 40 caliber hollow points, and it turned out he was wanted for rape, and he was a chameleon. He spoke perfect English, but he had a Jamaican accent, which was his native tongue, and he was wanted for like all these rape jobs. And special victims called me the next day on my day off. They're like, "Hey, you want to come in? You grabbed this guy." I'm like, "No, I said, I'm over at the beach." I said, "No, I'm good." Like I just didn't want any of it. I'm like, "No, as long as you got him, that's good." I made the collar. I got my overtime, my 8, 10, 12 hours, whatever I got. That was another thing, working those late tours. If you made a collar anytime on the ass end of your tour, you're going to be in for a long day because, by the time you get going and back then, by the time you get on the pile and get transport, and you were by yourself the whole time. Everybody went home, even the sergeant. So I was by myself for like a good 8, 10, 12 hours.
Voucher and shit and
Yeah. Well,
canceling the alarm and yeah.
usually it was after, transport, after they were transported, everyone else would go home and you would just stay to process. So you really kind of, as they say, write your own ticket as far as that goes. So no complaints. It was a lot of fun. We learned a lot, met some great people. But then, then I wanted, and talking with guys on auto crime, and that's when you learn, you understand what auto crime does and what auto larceny does. And there was a difference. There was a difference that not too many people know about. I can't count how many times people say, "Oh, you retired? Oh, you auto crime? Yeah. Oh, do you know so and so?" I'm like, no. I go, maybe he was in auto larceny in the north, let's say. And they'd say, "No, I think he was auto crime." I said, "Well, I was there." "Oh, yeah, he was there from this year." I go, "I was there those years. I knew everybody." I said,
Right.
and sometimes it happens, people just don't know exactly where their friends work and, they think they do. but I can tell you for sure they weren't, they weren't there. But and then you learn the subtle difference between what they do. Like, they cultivated CIs, and a lot of times they would come down. The Moondogs, remember the Moondogs?
Yeah.
That was the late night uh, calls for service auto crime.
Team.
Yeah, I think it was Billy Qualls, and
Yeah, yeah. I forgot about him.
I want to say Mike, Mr. Real. There was someone else. There was a couple other guys. I can't remember the names. But they would come down and do like an enhanced debriefing. If you had a GLA caller, the guy had some information. They would tell us in order law, say, hey, you got to call. If you got some good information, you have to call auto crime because they're the guys that can document the information. They can run with it. They can work with the DA. Make a deal, flip this guy, get a case going, and then you start learning the aspects of how they work. And for the greater good. Do all the guys in auto loss they think that way? I know. Some guys
No,
don't like they thought they were like seasoned investigators because, and
I did. Listen, I'm a prime example of that. And my sergeant, the guy I worked for, was a great guy, but we were like anti-crime and auto larceny. And we used to I'll tell you what, I almost didn't get into auto crime because I stepped on a lot of toes on auto crime. I would always call them. Whenever I had a card ID and I was hanging over there, I was a pain in the ass. I'll be the first to admit it. And then another time, my sergeant went running into a place on a Sunday night. It was a LoJack hit. We got the warrant and we went in there, and auto crime was pissed.
mm,
He took the brunt of that, and that's probably what kept him from going to auto crime. Somehow, I didn't wind up on their radar that I was a pain in the ass. And the way I got to auto crime was my sergeant, Manhattan North Narcotics, Jeff Hart, went to auto crime. And one day he saw me and he goes, why don't you put in for auto crime? I said, I'm never going to get it. He goes, you're not going to get it if you don't put in for it. Put in for it. But you're
yeah,
right. I mean, auto loss and auto crime, people think it's the same thing, and it's not. And I'm not knocking auto larceny because I came from auto larceny, but I was that guy that
yeah,
was a thorn in the side of the auto crime division. I know I was looking back.
right, yeah, no, yeah, it's no doubt, and I think I've probably had a few experiences of that, but then, before you realize, and listen, in auto larceny, they really weren't teaching you any investigative techniques as far as decks and locations and who knew you can dex a phone number, a location, a car, a person, and had you run a dex check, well, who's going to run a dex check at 3 o'clock in the morning or when you're trying to do a warrant? And we didn't know anything about that. What's a dex? I had no idea. Until I got to auto crime. But, you know, these guys put it in the system, and then you get somebody, young, ambitious guy like yourself or me, that want to, do some good and, you know, mess up their operation by doing a search warrant. But, yeah, you live and learn. I mean, listen, that I can only think of that ever happened and once or twice, not with me maybe, but with I can't speak for Queens North, but yeah, actually Queens North, I think there was some issues early on when I was in auto crime that they weren't following the rules and they were oblivious to what we were doing, and I think it worked out. I think they were spoken to.
I was spoken to. And I remember when you first get to auto crime, they run you through the week-long school. And then I remember going to the school for that week, and I remember looking in the calls for service office, which is like our command center. And there's usually 2 detectives in there, and you've got cops from all over the NYPD, all over the country, calling that office for information. And I remember saying to myself, watching those guys taking 2 calls at a time and running, and I was in awe of all the computers and different systems. And I said, thank God I don't have to do that. Right after after my week in the school, guess for 2 weeks, I had to sit there and do that shit. I was overwhelmed. But then once you learn everything, it's like they'll send you up there and you can do it with your eyes closed.
Yeah, and basically the same thing happened to me when I got to auto crime. Went through training, and then I was doing calls for service on a 4 to 12 with Kevin Gallagher.
Oh, yeah. I liked him.
Kevin was a good guy,
He
and
is.
we had some characters up there. And I can remember, back then when the phone rang, guys answered it, and they took these calls seriously. And later on, when it was running on full cylinders, I remember we were enhancing videos for like homicides, squads all over the city. They would send in a tidbit if it was auto related and help identify the car. It might have been grainy. They only got a piece of the taillight. And sometimes I would sit there for if it was a serious, they were all serious, but if it was a notable homicide, you try to help them out and help the detective out and say, listen, I think it's this. And you'd have a couple guys in there look at it. you know,
Yeah, I've
uh,
done that.
yeah, Taru would help out, but they were kind of more 9 to 5, try to get them enhanced. People always think, oh, it's grainy, you can enhance it. I go, well, if it's grainy and crappy to begin with, you ain't gonna get anything better. So you're screwed. You really gotta have to figure it out on yourself. But yeah, no, call service was great. And then slowly but surely, it really died down. And even when I was leaving, it changed a lot. It was more of a punishment
Right.
for guys that they
Weren't
couldn't.
pulling their weight or
Yeah, couldn't. So what do you get from that? You get crap. These guys are pissed off and disgruntled to begin with. So you would find the phone just unplugged. I'm not going to name any names, but guys would on the overnights would leave the phone unplugged, and that's another thing. When you were going back to auto loss, see, if we needed help IDing a car, our first call would be auto crime. And on the overnight, it was Gary Rifkin, and God bless, rest in peace,
yeah,
Gary. He uh,
yeah.
he loved it. He as crazy as
Oh, it
Gary,
was his life.
as
It was his life.
as much as nutty as he was, he loved doing that job. And he would say, "Oh, what do you got there?" He had a little high pitched voice, and
Yeah.
he'd walk you
Okay.
through it. Exactly. Anyway,
I
Gary,
worked with him
did you?
in the Bronx.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in Bronx Task Force when I first got there. He was the one that actually kind of opened my eyes to this stuff.
Wow. Yeah. I like Gary. I don't know what happened to him in his later years when he retired, but I know he's passed. Not
Yeah.
too not too long ago, a few years ago.
Yeah.
I kind of lose track of time when after being retired for 10 years and you try to sit back, oh, that was only 3, 4 years ago. It turns out it was 12 years ago. And, that just shows you that we're all getting old.
What was your first team in auto crime?
My first team was after calls for service, I went to Queens South. I kind of figured they wanted to put you in the neighborhood you worked in. So, I knew Queens at the time. I worked in Queens South in 103, worked Queens South Auto Larceny. I guess they wanted to give you a chance to work the area that you worked in, maybe to develop some stuff. And we had a pretty, I'm trying to say early on who was on the team. Jimmy Haley, Mr. Lenny Carinci. There was others. It'll come to me slowly but surely. But we shared an office, I think, with some other people. Oh, Mr. Jack Gilios, and more guys will come to mind. But guys come and go, this and that. John Dugan was in that team at
Yeah.
one point in time.
So, Mickey, you worked on a fascinating case. Could you tell us about the Queens County Choppers case?
Sure. So that case was developed by a complainant that went to the 104 squad and he had his motorcycle stolen. And it was a unique motorcycle in the fact that he had it customized with different paints and stripes and had some work done on it, some performance modification work. And this guy was absolute sure that he's seen his bearings on eBay for sale. So I got a call from a 104 detective, Pete Grzmowski. He called auto crime and got to me. And I said, yeah. I said, we'll come take a look. So we went to the precinct, met with the complainant, met with Detective Pete. And the kid showed me a side by side. The kid was prepared. He had a side by side photo of the part on eBay and a side by side picture of the same scratch on his motorcycle. Because when he scratched his bike, the kid was crying because it was his baby. And
Right.
he must have taken a close up shot of it to show his friends or whatever. And you could not mistake the two were identical. It's like, didn't take a forensic expert to figure out by looking at this, like maybe 1.5 inch crack. Plus the fairing was the same color. The crack was still there. I'm like, all right. I said, I don't know. That's enough to work with, but let's see. Thinking of outside the box. Well, this is the early 2000s, 2003, I think. And that was that was one part of the case of trying to find out who posted these on eBay for sale. Getting with eBay, getting an IP address, getting subpoenas, finding out you get an address, comes back to a Queens location, that these photos for these stolen items on eBay were being posted from this IP address, which is like for those people that might not know, it's like an address to a computer base that you're at an address or location. So it came back to this. So I kind of just went up there a couple of times and looked from an adjoining apartment building. There's only one apartment building in this residential neighborhood in Queens. It's a 4-story building. So I would go up there once in a while bring my sandwich, sit in a lawn chair, and just look down at the property. And then one day I'm just sitting there and I'm hearing air guns go off. I'm hearing a lot of activity from this small, tiny garage, one car garage detached from the house. And then like a couple hours later, everything would be laid out on the lawn in sets, all the fairings, all the unidentifiable parts from a motorcycle, nothing that had an engine number or a PIN number. And then the photographs would be taken by an individual. And that night they would be uploaded on eBay. All right. So now we're getting warmer, as they say, right? So like, all right, this is cool. So then now we're setting up a camera. So that leads to that. We got a camera set up. And there's a couple of things that happened. So at the same time as this is going on, I'm starting the case. The CO at the time summons me to his office. He goes, shows me a video. There's a guy on a motorcycle teasing the Highway 3 guys on the midnight. He's posting these videos. He's doing 188 miles an hour on like the Clearview and the Parkway there, Northern State. And he's taunting the highway department to chase him. And he was doing this for nights. So it turns out that this individual, they wanted him because he was putting these YouTube videos out very early on. And the music being played to the video was Cop Killer by Ice P, I think. I don't even know. So it was very derogative towards cops, making fun of cops, playing the Cop Killer music and this and that. And this IP address to the video. So he showed me the video. He goes, what can I do with this? I said, after experiencing what I did with eBay recently, a couple of weeks prior, I said, yeah, we can find out. Come to find out, the IP address for that video was the same person that I'm selling the eBay stuff.
Man.
So it's one and the same. So now we got a name, we got an address, we got a location, we have all these parts. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know what's stolen, what's not. We don't know anything. So we come to realize that there was a crew out there stealing bikes from all over. Every borough with the exception of Staten Island, which they did do one, and Manhattan, and Nassau and Suffolk County. There was a pattern in every borough, including Long Island, that these bikes now they were stealing a lot of bikes. So, with some old fashioned surveillance, we started following the parts. We knew the eBay stuff going out, you can't identify. Even though it looks similar, you can't say for sure it's that, no DA in the world is going to write that up. But to get a foot in the door, the scratches were very important in getting warrants for eavesdropping warrants. Not only, it was the first time in Queens that we did eavesdropping warrants for emails. So we were eavesdropping, it was like a wiretap, but just for his emails. And eventually we were up on the phones. So all the communications, emails, this and that. So the engines would go in a different little case and they would be brought to JFK Airport and they would be shipped out. Like, why are the engines being shipped out? So it turned out they were being shipped out to other states. So a lot of these motorcycle engines, especially these rice rockets, as we call them, they used motorcycle engines in these, they call them legends cars or desert dwarf cars, racing cars. They were like miniature versions of full-size race cars where just one person could fit in them. And they call them dwarf car racing. And they utilized all these high-tech motorcycle engines. So this guy was selling the motors separately, 10 a week, out to these Midwest, California, Arizona, all over. And once we caught on to how they were being shipped out of a place by JFK, like I said. So we went and did a sneak and peek warrant one time and opened up the box, got the engine number. And at this point, I was in contact with Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki. So I had all these techs at standby on a phone call, and I would give them a VIN number. I would give them an engine number, and they would give me cross-reference it with the VIN, and then we get the hit. And a lot of them for burglaries. And then
Were they breaking into garages?
Yeah, detached and attached garages. And they traveled with the crew had a locksmith they worked with. They had a guy that would bypass the alarm, a guy that would undo the lock, the two guys that carry it out, put it into a van. And, a lot of these bikes you can carry out. Some of the large, Harley, you might not be able to, but some of these bikes they were able to pick them up and get them into like a minivan, for example. So, they had a whole crew going. So, then they had a guy. So the fairings would go on eBay, all the unidentifiable stuff, wheels, tires, the front forks, the fairings would get for sale on eBay. The engines would go out Midwest, and the frame would, at a certain time, once a week, a carting company would come by, pull in front of his house only, get a pile of frames, put them right in the garbage truck, and they'd crush them right there in front of the street, right in the garbage truck. So, once it took some time to piece all these players together, the structure of the crew, whatever you want to call it, the corruption, the enterprise, whatever, you want to call it.
And yeah,
And
enterprise corruption. It's like
yeah,
RICO for the state level.
and it was, it was picking up steam. I actually had a friend's motorcycle that was stolen out of Queens from that crew. Yeah. It was actually another cop, a good friend of mine. He's his bike was stolen. He stopped after work one night and he heard his bike start up when he was in the store and they took off with it. And then I found out, during the takedown of the case, after doing a debrief to one of the guys, he owned up to it. And that's another story. But yeah, it was kind of chaotic. Things were going fast. So we had we had 3 or 4 different locations. There was other perpetrators in the case. There was about 3 or 4 main subjects in the case. So we had full-time surveillance on them. We were up on their phones. I want to say it was 14 months total, roughly, if I remember correctly. But every day was something else, and bikes were getting stolen like crazy. I know. And then after a while, for the good of the case, at some point, you got to bring it down. You got to stop them. And then we had all these other outside agencies that got wind of it. And it was actually Suffolk County who still friendly with a couple of guys in there that actually bikes were stolen. They had a DLQI hit. Is anyone familiar with that? So
No.
DLQI is a delayed hit. So say the bike was stolen yesterday, but the day before somebody ran the plate.
Oh, I know, Joe. Reverse. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So they were doing it that way. They were checking all their steals based on, and they had a list of bikes that were stolen that were ran previously within days before it being stolen. So they called. I don't know how we got in touch or how we found this out. I think it might have been someone in DMV said you guys should talk. And then actually, I knew the guy in Suffolk Auto Theft, Glenn Kirkpatrick, and Greg. Anyway, we met, we hit it off. I'm still friends with them today, and they had this information. I'm like, well, that's great. So then we figured out that so we started checking all our steals from New York City, and same thing was happening. All these vehicles were being stolen, and plates were being run, prior to their theft. And we found a DMV defensive driving class in Brooklyn was the common denominator where all these plates were being run. So, for example, these guys would be out in the street, and if they if the guy wanted a certain like a Kawasaki, or it's a Kawasaki Hayabusa, I could be wrong, Vic. Suzuki Hayabusa. I've been out of the game so long I forget.
Yeah, I've been out longer than you.
But the Hayabusa had a 1,000 cc motor, and that's what they wanted for these race cars. So they would give particular orders. It really didn't matter the color. It was basically the engine size they wanted. So if they would go to a bike show, a bike night, they'd see the bike with the engine they wanted. Boom, they would be
Right
plating
down the
up,
plate.
right down the plate. They would go to this place. They give it to the bad guys. They go out that night, and sometimes they were doing 2 or 3 a night, depending upon how many crews they had out that night. So we just built off that and just surveillance, and then it was time to take them down. And takedown was fun. You were a part of that, and
Yeah, I was on that. Yeah, I was a bit
yeah.
player on that.
But we had, everything had to be done quickly and simultaneously, and it was crazy the amount of parts and stuff, and we got it done. It was some monies recovered. Very strange time because I remember the main subject he had money in his house hidden, and he had like 2 stashes. He had like the go away cops stash, and then he had like the I'm retiring
Right.
going to the Bahamas stash. And we found the first stash and we thought that was it, right? But we were still, listening to their phone calls. So, he made the mistake of saying, he goes, yeah, they got some go away money. He goes, they didn't get my knot, as they said. I said, wow. I said, we can't, what are we going to do with that? So we had an amended warrant, went back the next day, and we went in with sledgehammers and crowbars, and I think might have been a chainsaw in the mix. And I said, I'm going to take this house apart, tread by tread. And he didn't want to own up to it. And then we had guys searching every nook of that house, and finally, like in a crawl space in an attic behind in a lockbox, someone yelled out "bingo!" and it was a lockbox filled with almost $200,000 in cash. Because a lot of stuff was cash deals, and
Oh yeah.
he would get paid however it was. Early on, things were these pay apps he was using. We never heard of it. We didn't never heard of them. It was even an eBay pay app, maybe PayPal. I think
PayPal problem.
might have been the inception of PayPal. And so then once we took that, we took everything from him. And he was a real winner. This guy would just sit around, watch his child while taking ecstasy, while babysitting his child, while his wife was out working. Like he didn't have a real job. He was like this street racer. claimed to be the fastest in New York City. In fact, he might have been. And that's the guy that used to post these videos to antagonize the cops. And powers that be, the CO and the highway guys, they wanted his, they wanted him on a platter, as to say, they wanted to make an example out of this guy. So
Well,
they
our old CO was a highway guy.
correct. And he was, going back to when he showed me that video, his highway buddies are calling him saying, "Hey, we can't have this. Our guys are being taunted." And don't ask me why he showed it to me. He just want to know what could be done about it. What can we do about it? And, just having learned what I can find out on eBay with this technology. So, learning the technology, IP addresses and getting warrants for listening to emails, never heard of it.
Yeah.
So would go in and I'd read all these emails and then eventually, wiretaps, that's been around for years, but this was the first time that I know of that Queens was able to get a warrant to monitor incoming and outgoing emails, which I thought was interesting because because a lot of stuff out of state. He listed a lot of the engines on these motorsports websites. So a lot of stuff was done through email. How much, the payment, shipping, everything was done on email. So we knew where everything was going. And
How
it's
much was he getting an engine? Do you know?
about $1,500 roughly. And then, so when they would come from New York, they'd load up the engine. They would go to Columbus, Ohio. And so when we did the first sneak and peek warrant in Queens, once he dropped it off that day, I had a warrant. We went and opened it, got a hit on it from a burglary, I remember. Actually, the first couple of ones were out of jurisdiction. They were from Long Island, Nassau, and Suffolk. So we couldn't do anything or get a wiretap going until we had a hit in New York City. So eventually, the third time, we got a hit on a third one. But one of the guys working at the shipping company told the perp when he was dropping off his next engine, "Hey, the cops are here looking at your stuff." So I went there under the disguise of a narcotics officer looking for drugs. And the perp laughed it off. He goes, "Ah, they were looking for drugs." He goes, "We don't do drugs. We just steal motorcycles." I'm still like that. So they just wrote it off. I said, "We can't do that again." I said, "We keep IDing engines every day. It's going to get back to them." So I made friends with Columbus PD, my good old friend Marty Maloney. And I said, I called this guy. He must have been having a slow day in Columbus, Ohio, but he was an oil theft guy. I said, "Listen, I need a hand with something." So he agreed to do it. And then once he did the first one, then I told him, I said, "We're probably going to be doing this every day or every other day." And then there was silence on the other end. Like, I'm making this guy work. He wasn't too happy about it. I said, "Listen, I really appreciate it." I said, "I have no one else to ask. I can't drive out to Ohio every other day and I do these things." So, we got the shipping company in Ohio on board, and then these guys were able to get warrants and ID these engines before they got, and we would send it, and we would let them get to the end user. So after doing that for a while, a lot of these guys out west did not suspect anything. They just thought these were like used motorcycle engines. They didn't. Maybe a few of them might have known when it was a brand new, pristine engine, no mileage, whatever. We confiscated. We took a lot of them back, but a lot of them just, took off. So when we took all this money from this one individual, when the case concluded, we did the takedown. A lot of the monies was given back to the victims, which I thought was kind of unique. We had like excess of like 200,000, I think, let's say. And a lot of these victims, some of them didn't have theft. They had insurance, but they didn't have theft on it. Or some didn't have insurance at all. Maybe they were in the garage, they weren't registered. And there was a list of within the jurisdiction that I was tasked with reaching out to these victims and finding out what their bike was worth and essentially cutting them a check for their loss. Now I'm in the insurance,
Oh, what a pain in the ass.
Can you imagine? And I mean,
No.
I'd say the majority of the legitimate thefts, it felt okay. There was a few I couldn't even get a hold of. There's a few that they're like, "What? You want to give me money? I didn't have the insurance for it." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't understand it either, but this is what they want me to do." So yeah, that was bizarre.
You're like the executor of a will.
Yeah, exactly. I totally didn't understand it. I'm like, "All right, whatever," and crazy stuff. But it worked out, and that was a long case. A lot of people, like I said, we had a lot of towards the end. We had a lot of people involved in helping me with that case. In no way could I have done that by myself with my limited knowledge at the time. We had some seasoned guys in the office that guided me and helped me how to organize and structure the case, and what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. And they were, I got to tell you, it was nice. It were, most people, I should say, were willing participants, and and, wanted to help. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun, and I learned so much from it, and then we developed, another case after that.
But with that case, the main subject, how much time did he get?
I wanna say it was, I wanna say 9 years, either 7.5 or 9, because they were all charged with enterprise corruption. The main subject and the 2 others, yeah, I think 7.5 to 9. I don't think they did the full term. I did keep tabs on them for a little while when they got out, but then I forgot about them, so I didn't hear much about them.
There was something else with that case that I remember. Wasn't there something being shipped to Hungary? Didn't you have something going international that there were motorcycles going to Hungary? Or maybe I got that case confused with another one.
There was being that at the eBay sales, parts were being sent overseas to, like, Italy, possibly Hungary. The only thing Hungary rings a bell is the skid steer Bobcat case we did, where a lot of those were being sent over to Hungary, if that's the one you're thinking about.
Was that
Motorcycles,
with
yeah.
Seamus?
No, it wasn't with Seamus at the time. I think it was with, Scott. His case, we had, heavy equipment being stolen, more importantly, Bobcats, skid steer loaders, and some Caterpillars, and it turns out, they were all rentals. It was all these rentals were being stolen while they were being out rented on whatever job site. So the common denominator was, Bobcat of New York, located in Queens, would send these Bobcats out to job sites for, rental agreements, fulfilling them. And this guy knew where they were. And then he had a guy that would go out and steal them off the job site. He knew they'd be there for a week. This guy would steal them. He'd bring it to another guy in Long Island City. And a lot of these were being shipped out to Hungary. And that was part of it, the skid steer loaders. So they would pull the pin plates off of them, put fake ones on them, send them out. And then it was a vicious cycle. They would just, because, in some of these third world countries, they don't have access to the equipment that we have,
Right.
just like a, not a skid steer loader, but a power bucket going to the Dominican Republic, or a bulldozer, or excavator, or something like that. With the infrastructure, they don't have much. They want to build a road or whatever. They need a piece of equipment. So they'll just go out and steal it, and move it that way. And a lot of times back then, a lot of equipment didn't have LoJack on it, or was
Defeated.
easily found and defeated. And so these guys were finding it easily. They would just lay it up. They'd use these wands to figure out the radio frequency to see if there was a LoJack shooting off the equipment. Sometimes you had to get ingenious. I remember a time when, I don't have to change subjects, but it was a heavy equipment case where and it was up in the Bronx. I'm trying to remember what year it was, Vic. It was, they were building the new stadium, Yankee Stadium, and they stole the piece of equipment, and it went from the Bronx, and I think it hit the bridge. I think the McCombs Dam Bridge right there. So not only did they steal the piece of, it was a power bucket, they stole the trailer that was next to it, and the tractor that pulled the trailer with the piece on. But when they put it on the trailer, they didn't articulate the boom and put it down all the way, so it was too high. So when they hit the bridge, they just tapped the bridge and severed 2 hydraulic lines. So, like, what do we do with that? So we called Caterpillar. So anything with Caterpillar, if you order a part for a Caterpillar piece of equipment, you have to give them a PIN number. And so reached out to a friendly in Caterpillar and said, listen, if anybody in the tri-state area ordered hydraulic lines for this PIN number, let us know. 2 days later, we got a hit. This place in Jersey, these 2 guys came in and ordered these hydraulic lines for this stolen Caterpillar. So, like, all right, this is cool. So we set up at the parts place, I think, the next day. Again, this wasn't my case. This was Jeff Laurie's case. And, just assisting him, we set up in a parking lot with a camera. I think we had a guy inside behind the counter somewhere. And these guys weren't regulars there. So we spoke to the guy. They said, no, they never seen him before. Like, all right. And they were Dominican guys.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah. And they basically show up and they go to get the parts. We're like, all right, like, yeah, you can sell them the parts, as long as they pay for it, and you can give them to them. And they got their parts, and we're like, all right, now we're following them. So we follow them to, like, not far away, a couple miles away, in this storage yard somewhere in Jersey, in a huge, like, commercial lot. It was filled with trucks and trailers, a mess. And they pull in the lot, and then so now we find a piece of equipment, and they had disabled, I don't know if there was a LoJack on it. There might have been a LoJack on it that they disabled before it was activated. So then we knew it was in the yard. So then it was either myself or Larry D'Amato that the next night were tasked with getting into the yard and placing a a GPS, magnet GPS on it. And so we had set that up, and then we had to sit there for days nearby watching it. So driving all the way from Queens to New Jersey, sitting there. And then one day it decided to move. So they were there, they fixed the hydraulic lines, they changed the pin plate, they got their paperwork in order, they started driving. And you would think, okay, it's going to go to Port of Elizabeth, it's going to
That's
go
what
out,
I thought. Yeah.
going to go out of Jersey, right? Well, these guys jump on 95, start heading south, it's going towards Baltimore. So like, oh, that's different. So I guess we're going to Baltimore.
Florida Baltimore.
Yeah. So, we followed him and follow him. I believe Mr. John Sergeant John Schwartz was involved in that night, and so, we probably would have drove to Florida if he let us. But, so we just go, and it was a slope. It wasn't by any means a pursuit of any, we were
No.
following. You're following a lowboy trailer on a tractor trailer, and nothing's fast about it. And it pulled into the port of Baltimore, so they had to make the decision to either grab it or let it go. But if you let it go, you'll never see it again because it goes into some of these countries and they're off. Once they're off the boat and on land,
You're not getting that thing back in the Dominican Republic.
no. And I think that's where it was. I think it was the DR. And they were, everything's corrupt at the ports down there. You'll never see it again. So we made the decision to grab it. So we grabbed it. And that was one of like numerous pieces. There was like 12 or 13 other pieces of equipment over a time frame that we grabbed. But yeah, it was just crazy stuff, Just not too many people looking at heavy equipment. But then once you look into it,
Oh yeah.
you can see, the regular patrol cops, they're not looking at a piece of equipment on a lowboy, or moving from one construction site to another. Nobody's looking at it. Me, I'm driving around the trail, zooming in on the pin plate, trying to get a number, without the driver knowing about it, which you can do in those big ones. But it was fun too. Something else to try to get. Back to the motorcycle case, it was a great case. But, usually when you stay busy, and I always try to stay busy for some reason, it just worked out that way. But when you stay busy and I guess proactive in a way, some cases lead into other cases, some experiences turn into other experiences, working with somebody, he might have something that comes up and he liked the way you guys work together. They might work together. You kind of bounce ideas off each other, but like I said, I can't complain about the help that I got from everybody there and everybody, I was willing to help them in any way and they were willing to help me. Most people there. I mean, there's a lot of, as we noticed, there was a lot of dead wood, empty suits, as they say, but you know, that could be a whole nother show.
We could do. I've got so many questions, and I'm not going to hold you hostage because there's so many things I want to talk to you about. And I will invite you on anytime you want to come on. But let's just change gears
Okay.
because I want to talk to you about your business, and that's important. I remember a few years ago, we're friends on Facebook, and you begin posting this decorative wall art, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, what is it? Like, I've never seen anything like this before. And I reached out to you. I hadn't spoken to you since we retired. And I says, Mickey, I want this. And you're like, well, how many pieces do you want? You remember, I think I wanted 4 or 5 pieces.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's going to cost money. I go, I don't care. I got to have these things in my house. And I have to tell you, because I have it in a room when you first come into my house, anyone that comes into my house, the first thing they ask me is, where'd you get this?
Right.
Tell me about what got you into this and where
Sure.
people can find it and
Sure.
maybe pricing or the
Yeah.
sizes you make.
Yeah. So actually you were like one of my first big orders. I started small. When I retired, my wife said, go find a hobby. The only hobby I had was smoking cigars. I started putzing around in my basement, making little things, making coin holders. I just started making stuff. I don't even know what prompted me. So then the catalyst really started, which put the idea in my head was one of my last arrests was in Brooklyn, and I believe it was the 8-1. And I'm sitting in the precinct processing the collar. I'm in basically the muster room. There was a desk because I'm a guest. I wasn't even in the squad. And I look up on the wall, and in the 8-1, that's where Officer Ramos and Lou were shot and killed in December of 2014, sitting in their patrol car. They were assassinated, which is obviously tragic. But looking on the wall, there was this beautiful 4-foot by maybe 3-foot carved mural of them with their shields, crosses, and it was painted, which I had a photo to show you. It just took me. I'm just sitting there, I'm looking at the wall and I'm thinking of something, and it just took me. I'm like, somebody made that and painted that and hung that on the wall. I'm really started thinking about the work that was involved in making that. I was intrigued to say the least. I snapped a photo of it. It was on my mind. This was less than a year, maybe 6 months right after the incident. So now that I'm retired, I tracked the guy down. So the gentleman that made it his name is Noah Bennett. Was a Las Vegas metropolitan police officer, and his father-in-law passed away and left him this carving machine. And him and his wife, he learned how to use it. She learned how to paint, and he started this organization called Hearts and Crosses, which creates these memorial plaques for jurisdictions all over the country and makes them and delivers them and hangs them in the precinct of occurrence. And I was like, for no money at all. So I was like, you gotta be kidding me. It's incredible. Like, I didn't know people did this. So I talked to him, finally got a hold of him. We spoke. And then I knew I had to buy a machine. So I couldn't afford a machine because they're expensive. But what I could afford was pieces of machine that I built. And it took me a year to build it and to learn the CAD design, the software, how to take a two-dimensional photo and turn it into a three-dimensional model, and then yet have the machine carve it out, and then how to apply paint and how to design all this stuff. It took a while, but that's how it started. That planted the seed in my head, and then I wanted to, you know, if I had unlimited funds, I would give everything away. My life is obviously different now that I'm retired. I've had some tragedies in my life, my personal life, and I wanted this is a way of me giving back. Like so now, um, by making this stuff, by selling it and by making plaques or shadow boxes for guys retiring, or they want a shield for their man cave, or it's a guy like yourself that wants to put something on display. Those are great. And I tell these guys that part of the proceeds allows me to buy extra material and I just pay it forward. For example, if somebody passes away for whatever reason locally that I know, or don't even if I don't know, and I can make out a plaque or a sign, and I can get it to the funeral home you know, in that quick time frame, it's something the family can have and take home with them. I was amazed. Yeah, flowers are beautiful. Flowers are nice. Everyone sends flowers, but I've done enough of these now where when I create a plaque in loving memory of their loved one, they can take it home and, it's something that they can have, maybe put a smile on their face for a few minutes. They can hang on a wall and glance at it from time to time. I also hooked up with Blue Lives Matters, New York City. Um, so about early on, I'd say a year into it, in 2017, I was um, asked to create some fields for, again, Ray Muslim Lou. So I think it was a year or two after their passing, maybe a little bit longer. I was 2014. And I created some shields. I presented them to the widows. At first, I wanted to drop them off, and I had to drive to Staten Island. I was like, all right, Staten Island. But I was so engulfed in wanting to take care of these people. I just wanted to go drop them off and come home. And then Sergeant there said to me, he goes, wait a minute. He goes, you were on the job? I said, yeah. So he started asking me questions about my bio. And he goes, I would like you to present them to the widows every year. I'm like, well, and I was petrified. I'm like, I'm not a public speaker. I don't know if I could do this. I did it once. It was okay. I did it the second time was better. And now I look forward to when I can, I go and present. Joe and Paris, the president of Blue Lives Matters, he'll call me and say, we're honoring these, this is who we're going to honor this year. Can you make 2 plaques? I go up, and they're not just small plaques. They're like 18 by 24-inch plaques with an 18-inch shield with their name on it. And I try to incorporate wherever they worked and a little saying and, something special about them. And that's it, and it breaks my heart to have to present these to the widows. Um, you can see it in their faces that, it brightens them up. If only for a few minutes, it puts a smile on their face. It's worth it to me. It's not gonna fix all their problems after what happened to them, but it's gonna cheer them up for a few minutes. And from time to time, if they stare at it, and, they honor in honor of them passing and to memorialize them any way they can. And that's what I do. So that started with that. And then it kind of turned into a business where I started doing different things, doing tumblers and plaques. And I've gotten involved in some larger pieces for like golf courses and some outdoor signage. And I'm still learning as I go. I've had no experience with this stuff before retiring. I just kind of learned it as I go. And I'm constantly learning. fire department. I did some work for the FDNY recently. Some stuff's not on the website, but on my socials, I do have some stuff, more recent stuff. Yeah, it's slowly spreading by word of mouth, and I just have a website. I advertise in the Retired Detectives newsletter every month, and yeah, it's good. I can't complain. I also involved with the DEA and helping them out, widows and orphans, and if I get a call from Scott, let's say, and they need a special project or something, I'll go over and above and make sure it gets done for them. A lot of times, again, a lot of times if it's a line of duty situation, there'll be no cost to anybody. I'll just do it myself, and I believe in paying it forward. I don't think I would sleep well at night knowing I took money from somebody to honor somebody. Just doesn't sit well with me. So, but then again, like I said, always constantly learning, and yeah, I enjoy it. It's my therapy time. I get to go down there and play and paint and make things happen.
To call them plaques is, I mean, they're pieces, they're art. It's
Oh yeah,
artwork.
yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
it's signage of any police department or detective shield or cop shield of what their department. It's like taking something and blowing it up to something that you could have on your wall. Just the colors are brilliant, and so. I mean, I encourage my listeners to check out, what is it, signandseal.net.
Yes, signandseal.net. They can contact me. My phone number is listed, my email, my personal email, Mickey at signandseal.net's on there. There's a photo gallery, little bio. Um, and a lot of stuff that I've done in the past is on the photo galleries. Help them out with the wording, the verbiage. I suggest things. Sometimes people don't know what they want. They just want something for my cousin's on the job and he's retiring. I got to do something for him. What can you do? And I'll make some suggestions. And which is great. I try to help everybody out. The price budget. I mean, anything from to $100 or $175 up and up to $700-800 on some of the large pieces that are uh, multi-layered. They're carved pieces, hand painted, um, mounted. They do a lot with laser engraving now. So a lot of plates, metallic plates can go on. You can customize. Shadow boxes have been popular. I've actually gotten dupe shields made with and had shadow boxes made for people. I've been doing a lot of those. And then sometimes it's just, if it's not in someone's budget around the holidays, they want a Yeti, with somebody's shield number on it or a patch, I'll bang out a Yeti for them. And I got some lower, more affordable plaques for people that, I get in calls. Hey, we're having a racket. It's tomorrow night. Can I get a plaque made? I'm like, tomorrow night? I said, we'll see what I can do. I said, I do have options for that. So I have a full color option I do on metal that I can do a plaque, either 8.5 by 11 or 9 by 12 plaque for any type of recipient. If it's a retirement, promotion, in a full color on metal, I can do it. I can have it done within 24 hours. And, you know, I don't want to say cops are cheap. But cops are cheap. And I've dealt, not all of them.
I wasn't.
No, by no means, Vic, you were not cheap. You were not cheap at all. But a lot of them are, and, they have a budget. I get it. And, I try to help people out. So in learning different techniques, I can help them be within a budget. And some guys have a budget, some guys don't. They know what they want. They see something they like, they want that, and that's it. So I try to work with people on that. And then I get people that say, "Hey, and what if I order 30 of them?" I'm like, "Well, I don't have I don't have 30 little people working in my basement. It's just me. I'm one guy. So whether you order 10, 5, 20, 40, it's the same. It's more work for me." I said, I can't. I'm
Right.
not.
You're
I'm
not
not
mass producing these things.
Yeah, I'm not set up like that, and some guys get it, some don't, and, that's a whole learning aspect of dealing with people, with pricing and trying to be
Mhm.
competitive and trying to do the right thing. It's a learning curve too, so, being into it for this many years now, I've learned a lot of things and, I've learned to not to undervalue some of my stuff and then try to be competitive and I try not to hammer people over the head and, because, there's a lot of people out there that are doing this now. I mean, I don't put all my eggs in one basket. I don't just do NYPD police department. I have some corporate accounts for some other stuff that I do work for. That keeps, that's the bread and butter stuff that keeps some of the bills paid in the shop. And some of the machines that I've invested probably over $30,000 in machines in the last 4 or 5 years. I just upgraded one. So, there's a cost factor. So I got to keep that in mind when I'm pricing something. A lot of people don't understand that. Some of these things, some of the machines cost money to operate and cost money to purchase. But I'm in pretty good shape, and I think we're moving along good. So it's been great. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. I really do enjoy it.
And you offer shipping to anywhere in the country.
Yeah. Yep. I ship all over. Yep. No, I'm sorry. I've done a few items for out in California after the mudslides. We had some family out there during the Montecito mudslide, and they really came forward and helped out. So I made a beautiful plaque for the Montecito Fire Department, and on a trip out there, I presented it to them, and it was nice. They did a little news recap on it out there, and it was something they put in their firehouse. Very rewarding. I just do it to honor people, and sometimes I sell things to pay for other things, and I try to be as transparent as I can with people. I'm like, listen, this is what I do. Also, it's not just me telling you this. I also pay it forward. And if someone was to call me from anywhere in the country, and they say they need help with something, I'd be the first person to help them and, put something together for them. And, if they couldn't afford it, I would work with them and probably do it for nothing. So if it's a special memorial of a deserving participant, I would definitely help out. So that's been my motto, you know, comes around, goes around, try to do the right thing. And I'm in a good place with that. So I think we're doing all right.
One last time, it's signandseal.net.
Correct.
Go out there, check it out. He'll do work for any police department or fire department in the country, and he offers shipping. Mickey, thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us today.
Thank you, Vic. I appreciate it. Had a great time.
Anytime. I did too. It brings back a lot of memories. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in, especially my listeners in Kearney, New Jersey, Douglasville, Georgia, Pearl River, New York, Montqueca, Illinois, New Britain, Connecticut, and Red Bank, New Jersey. If you work in law enforcement or have an interesting criminal background, please drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram at Vic Ferrari. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you enjoy the content, check out my Amazon author page where you can preview all my NYPD books for free. Just type in my name, Vic Ferrari like the car, and I'll have another episode out next week. Thanks, everyone. Take care.